we are here. We are talking about the book Never Split the Difference. We are going to be going over chapters 5 and 6. Trigger the 2 words that immediately transform and negotiate in any negotiation, and 6, bend their reality. And I can't wait to talk today. I got a story, and Steve, you're the only one that hasn't heard it.
Cool. I'll take it. For which one? Bend their reality or for the 2 words?
Yes, both.
So
perfect situation, perfect setup. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version since we only have 45 minutes, but go ahead. Take the lead, my fearless friend.
Right. So here we are, chapter 5. So we're learning mirroring, we're learning labeling, learning all that. So now we're starting in. We got to also include the 2 most important words, which if you've been married more than 5 minutes or engaged or whatever for more than 5 minutes, you know, as a husband, I've often said yes, and she's often said yes, and it was not a yes. And I've also learned that if I do the certain things and I get a that's right from her, and she knows that I'm listening and I understand whatever, that's different. You know, that there's cohesiveness there. So the whole point of this chapter, and I think this was the shortest chapter of the whole book. I think it was only like 30 minutes or something like that. But the great story he tells in the book is about his son playing linebacker. He used to be a lineman and used to run people over. And he couldn't become a linebacker because he tried to run people over, and you can't run people over as a linebacker. So you had to, but they couldn't get in his head. And finally he said, sounds like you feel like it's not manly to dodge a tackle and not run people over. And he said, that's right. And then he learned his thing, and he, whatever, you know, became a superhuman freak and, you know.
Football player.
Yeah. Anyway. So that, all that being said, how do we see this playing out in our lives? Whether it's real estate or, you know, through our businesses, or whether it's in the real world. I mean, this is one of the things where you didn't realize this was a thing, and then when you read it, you're like, holy crap, this is totally a thing.
So here was my aha. I listened to these 2 chapters probably about 4 times on the plane ride, because it was a 4-hour plane ride there and back. So I just listened to it, and then I was getting a root canal this week, so I decided to make my dentist listen. I said, my headphones are broken. Can I turn my phone on? They were like, well, what are you listening to? A podcast? I said, no, it's a book, but you have to shut up and you can't tell me what's going on in my mouth. I really don't care. I just want to listen. And so after it was over, the guy was like, oh my God, that was like amazing advice. I'm going to start using it with my patients, because it was the chapter on getting to know, right? And so I made the decision that anytime I'm talking to a person that there needs to be an outcome, I'm only asking no questions. And with Steve, I know you're not up to date yet, but we've got a whole new division in the company that just rolled out called collaboration. So I've got some agents, Alicia being one of them, that are working some of my leads right now. And I just got done training them on the no question. Like when you make that phone call, hey, have you found the perfect house yet? Should be the first question, right? They're immediately off the defense. And so I did that with my scout group this week, and I'm so excited. It was like a perfect no, you're right. So I had all my parents come up, right? In a group of kids, you need volunteers. So I had all my parents come up, separated my parents based on their age groups. And then I took them through a series of questions. Hey, when your kids, put your hand down if your answer is yes. Do you want your kids on site on a gun range shooting BB guns where the rangers are not appropriately trained? No.
Right.
Do you want your kids showing up to the PAC meetings where there's no plan? Do you want your kids to get to the end of their scout year and have not earned anything? And this was my favorite question, because it was a combination of the no and you're right. And I said, now let me ask all you people, do you think somebody absolutely fabulous is going to walk in off the streets and raise their hand to be your kid's den leader? The answer was no, right? And then it was like, oh, you're right. Nobody else. We've got to find a leader from this group of humans for each den. So then I said, okay, now here's the deal. So you guys have heard my questions. I have literally nothing else to say. I'm just going to stand up here until I have a den leader standing next to me from each group and someone to coordinate the outings, because we're supposed to be going camping in a week and a half and no one's booked it and I'm not. I don't care if y'all go camping. It's really no skin off my back. It's your kids that want to go. Mine are in scouts. We have people to do that in my troop already. Within 5 minutes, I had 3 leaders and a coordinator. And what was hysterical, the best part of the whole story is when I walked up on the Cub Master, he had started having this conversation probably 5 minutes before the troop or the pack meeting was supposed to start. Y'all, he was sweating bullets because he was standing up there with a bunch of parents looking at him going, guys, don't you think we should have a good troop or a good pack? And like the leaders are important and we can't do anything without you guys. And they were all standing there on their phones, like not listening. And it was a perfect segue from that chapter because it worked like a charm. So I'm asking everybody no questions the rest of my life.
No questions the rest of your life?
That way I get my way.
I'd hear you there. It didn't work, but we'll try it. All right, Devin, what you got?
Yeah, so with this chapter, I feel like this kind of becomes relevant a lot with like if I'm teaching somebody something. So as a CPA, I get asked a lot of finance questions. How do I budget? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so for me, whenever I'm actually going through explanations, I've kind of noticed, and I actually noticed it from this book. I've noticed, I can tell when people understand or not. It's from, if they don't understand, you explain it and they'll say, oh, you're right. But if you explain it and they understand it and they put it together, they say, that's right.
That's right.
So for me, it's like, I'm actually usually listening for it to kind of see, okay, well, where is this person as we're in this conversation, So that for me, that's kind of where it usually pops up.
Right. All right. How about
Alicia?
So I haven't really implemented anything other than mirroring. My husband's actually the one who actually got the book. And I was like, we have like 6 library logins. So I was already listening to it and he didn't even know. And so we were in the car dropping the kids off and he was telling a story about his last work trip he went on. And they're always the same, but he was saying like how horrible one of the hotels was, blah, 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 blah. And I think I said something like Pensacola. And he immediately started like spewing more. So this one's back to mirroring, but he started spewing more. And before he even said anything worthwhile, I just busted out laughing because it worked. And I stopped him and I'm like, I just used the thing from the book on you and it worked. Like you just started spewing. And actually I already knew your story, but I just wanted to hear my own voice practice the thing.
Right.
And it's amazing.
And so then he was like, it worked on me, you use it, because he's our negotiator in the family. Like I'm like,
she's gonna be the negotiator.
The funny thing is, as we go further in the book, he tells a story about his son. They're going on a fishing trip together and he's talking to his son and his son's doing it to him and he has no idea. And after about like 15, 20 minutes, the person next to them just dying laughing. He's like, why are you laughing? It's like, do you not? He's doing it to you. Like you wrote the freaking book and he's doing it to you and you don't even see it.
That's awesome.
Well, and that's what I love about these tactics, right? Because when you follow the yes, right? Because when you first get in real estate, everybody's like, get them to say yes, make them think you're right, then they'll follow you. This tactic keeps you on the offense, so you never see it coming. All of his tactics set people up to feel like they can trust you. And who do people work with? People they like, know, and trust.
For me, I feel like when he explains some of that stuff, as a consumer, I feel like the way that he's saying to talk to people, I'm always like, yes, that's how I want to be talked to. That's how I want to be spoken to. And so I like that he's out there teaching people like an appropriate way to actually interact with all of us, even if you don't need or want anything out of it.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I've been that airport agent that he described in another chapter when the
Right.
weather comes in. Like, I've literally had that job. And so,
what a lovely, fun job that must be.
yeah, it's
Real estate, baby.
Laura, could you do that, Laura? Could you imagine that for 2 seconds?
Delta
Ma'am,
would
can
be
you,
fun.
ma'am, can you help me? No, you need to back the hell up. Is what you need to do. I'll tell you what I'm gonna.
Let me ask you a question. Can you
Oh
help
my
yourself?
goodness.
Take this laptop and shove it up your butt.
so I did also text my husband this morning, and I'm like, so he was at another brokerage at one time, and one of the brokers was actually preaching like, you only need to show buyers 3 homes. If they need more than that, then you're all wasting time. And so I texted him this morning after finishing 6. I'm like, I can't wait to use some of these to not be running all over town showing people because they can't decide or don't know what they want. So I'm excited to use that in a way that's effective for me, but for them too, because I do feel like the more leash you give a buyer, the further they'll stray. And so I'm excited to implement some of this.
So, and I think that she just made a great point, right? Because we show buyers all the time. And the fact is, in Atlanta, once you've seen 5 houses in your price point, you've seen every floor plan.
Seen them all.
So that's a great question. So I hear that you're wanting to see more houses and we haven't found the right one. Do you think we're going to see anything different in the homes that we're looking at? That's like a perfect question.
I like that.
I'll be using that a lot.
Nice. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing. I mean, one of my favorite, and this is not associated with this book, but one of my favorite sayings in real estate is ask 100 questions to show 4 houses instead of asking 4 questions to show 100 houses.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard that like 100 years ago. I'm like, I'm going to get that tattooed right here. There you go. So we got to that's right. Now we're going to bend their reality, as they say. So in bending their reality, a lot of it is a way for them to, it's kind of like the mental game now. Now we're getting into how can we use all of these things to now move the machine, move things the way that we want it to be. And obviously he goes through the things talking about like anchoring their emotions, letting them go first, establishing a range, things like that, like when getting into the brass tacks of it. But talk to me a little bit about like your thoughts on the whole bending their reality thing. Because the big thing about this one is compromise.
Right. Well, to me, this is the pain versus pleasure part of the book, right? When you're in a negotiating situation, I was just training them this morning and we were kind of going through like, don't give up on people just because they tell you something. Because a lot of times what they tell you is not really reality, right? I interviewed a lady. She's like, I'm talking to 900 realtors and I don't have to buy till June. Well, guess what? We're closing in November. And guess who she hired? Me, right? Because I was willing to your point, to listen and then to be able to accommodate what her needs were because I knew what her pain point was, right? And that's kind of what he talks about when he's talking about that hostage situation where they're after the aunt and they want the $150,000. Well, really, they're looking for weekend money, right?
Party money.
How much does it cost to go party in Guam or wherever the hell they were?
Port-au-Prince.
Wherever. Those are details that don't matter to me. I don't remember the small details, not my lane. But when I was talking to that client, I realized her pain point. And the reason she hadn't hired a realtor was because no one had given her a solution to get out of her lease. Well, as soon as I said, your lease is the only thing holding you back of making a decision, let me negotiate $7,000, let the seller pay the fee to break it. She signed the contract the next day. So for me, it that kind of just parallels finding that pain point.
Right. And it's the thing, I mean, it's just, you can't just go to somebody and say, hey, my name's Steve. What's your pain? Tell me what's wrong. Tell me what's wrong, and I'll solve it. Which, as a guy, because as a guy, that's what we do. You know, it's like, look, what's broken? Let me go fix it.
Mhm.
And so that's what the cool thing about this book is like, slow down, back up, you know, throw out some line, let them swim out a little bit, you know, then come in. All right, David, you're up.
Yeah, so for this one, I feel like there's always an expectation. Like whenever you're in a conversation, I want this, I want that, I want to try and get this, I want to try and get that. That doesn't always match up with reality. I like this chapter because it essentially almost gives you like a guide to one, how to get them to reality. And it's, you know, and I mean, it makes sense. So like, for instance, I always struggled with fair. And it's like, you know, he goes through this book and I mean, he completely nips it in the butt. I'm like, wow, because I've always struggled with it. I'm like, wow, okay, you know, if I really think about it, sure, this is a lot more for me. Maybe it's a little less for you. Maybe that's not fair, you know? And so it's like, okay, well, instead of me sitting here and thinking about it in my head, just say it out loud. Fair? What do you mean by fair?
Right.
You know, and then that just opens up the conversation. And it's like, it's funny because I feel like the way he explains it, it puts it back on them. And then instead of us running around in our heads like, oh crap, I wasn't expecting that. It's now them running around in their heads like, oh wow, okay, you know, that's a good point. Maybe I'm not being fair. Maybe this isn't reality. But yeah.
Well, and it was nice to make the realization that win-win or no deal doesn't equal fair.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Win-win or no deal doesn't necessarily equal fair across the board. And that was kind of an aha, like, oh, wait a second. You know, and I tell people that as I'm coaching agents, I tell them that all the time, but I've never had, like, to your point, David, when you throw that word fair in there, it's like, whoa. Because if you're working through a divorce situation, listen, it's a win-win if that couple sells their house. And it's a huge win if the buyer gets a good deal because the couple just wants out, right? They want to. So that's not really a fair deal, but it is a win-win. Everybody gets paid, the house gets sold, the buyer gets a new home to live in, and then the couple can move on with whatever part of the next step of life is going to be. So I like the emphasis on the word fair not being reality.
Right. I like that he kind of figures out a way where if somebody throws you the fair grenade, you can just throw it right back to them. Right. Like, you know, like, what about, you know, what can we do to make this fair? Or what do you see about this that isn't fair? You know, something like that. Throw it back to them. Give them a what question and throw it back to them, you know, and let them solve it.
Right.
Not my job to figure out why you don't think it's fair. You know what I mean? Why do you think it's not fair? You tell me, you know?
Well, when you ask somebody or when you tell somebody it's not fair, they start negotiating with themselves. Oh,
right.
Well, how can I make it fair? Because as humans, we're not all the people that he's negotiating with in his book. That's 1% of humans that suck. The rest of us kind of like each other and want peace and harmony, right? So when you hear that fair word, your brain starts, how do I fix it?
Right.
That's human nature.
Right. I would say one thing I thought about quite a bit in this chapter was like real estate investing. So, you know, sending out offers. Like what the seller wants is never what I can pay. And it's like, you know, the anchor that he was talking about, I mean, you know, those lowball offers, that's exactly what it is. It's like, look, I don't mean to offend you, but I'm letting you know where I'm coming in. I'm making come up. We've got to talk about that, you know? So I just thought about that the whole time. It was just so funny to me.
So one of the other things, so there's a couple things about this chapter that I want to include before we run out of time here. One of them is deadlines and the power of
Yes.
deadlines and the perceived threat of deadlines, things like that.
Yes.
To me, if I'm selling a house and somebody sends an offer and we're waiting for multiple offers or whatever, and my seller's all like, they said 12 o'clock tomorrow. Do we need to get back to them? I'm like, no.
What are they going to do if you say yes the next day? No,
There's
I don't want that house because you didn't buy it and you didn't agree in the 24 hours I gave you. They're
Now,
going to say yes.
But that's the thing. So that's the thing between some agents. I mean, some agents kind of get like, oh crap, we have to, and it's like, it's okay because we don't want to be moved by.
Well, you've got those agents that give you the multiple offer situation. They're like, sign my agreement now, sign my agreement. And they get so pushy and they start like making you feel like their deadline is the only one that matters totally across the board. I actually coached a client of mine who's looking to buy an off-market property, just something I'm not involved in right this second. I will be when he flips it, if he gets the property. And the guy wanted him to pay $165,000 for this house. It's derelict. It needs a total renovation at $120,000, and it's going to sell for probably $300,000. Okay, there's 30% equity in there. Well, boom. Then we find out the house is a tenant in it, and he wants us to take on the house at $170,000 or $62,000 with the tenant in it. So I told Salman, let me ask you one more question. That's his favorite line. He tells me that all the time. He asks me about 900 questions before we hang up. But I told him last night, I said, just ask him. I said, listen, here's the bottom line. Like, are you willing to let your client walk away with no money and go into foreclosure because the sale is November 1st?
Right.
Are you willing to walk into the situation and let your client possibly have a bill after the foreclosure? Because if they don't get all the money, the bank is about to dump into that house back after they sell it and you're upside down. They come back after you for what you owe.
Right.
And I said, and then shut up. I told him, I said, then shut up. Let him talk. Let the silence happen 3 times before you say a word. And then the next thing I want you to say to him is, listen, I've got 3 other houses I'm looking at. I'm making a decision tomorrow. I need to know by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Here's my offer. I'll give your seller $20,000 more than they owe on their mortgage, which is about $100,000, because I have an unknown and I don't know what the price is to kick this person out. Now I know, and I know what my husband said he would do it for, which is $10,000. It's way less than the $60,000, but that person doesn't know what Salman's been quoted, and we don't know that it's really going to take $10,000. We may have to burn the house down. I don't fucking know. Get out. But I told him, I said, the deadline thing was it. I said, tell him you need to know in the next hour or you're walking.
Right. So that's a properly used deadline. Right. Because again, it's associated with your doing well, not mine. Look, here's the deal. I got 3 other things. I'm making a decision 9 o'clock tomorrow. Let me know if you want to play. That's got nothing to do with me.
I called to see if we won the house. I don't know yet. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know if this stuff works. All our tricks that we're learning.
Right.
So I saw the same angle hearing the what was chapter 6 called?
Bend the reality.
Bend the reality, and those false deadlines more so against other realtors, because that's exactly why we all get a bad rap. And so that was kind of how I internalized that section of like, well, sign the offer, sign the offer, sign the offer. And it becomes an emotional thing for them, even though it's none of their business. So I like that. I also like how when he gives an example of going first, that he starts with like, I know I sound like a really bad person, and it probably seems like I can't do my job. That was exactly, without labeling it or being conscious of it, I think, is how my husband attacked the Op City leads.
Mhm.
He would start with, look, I know 10,000 people have called you. I know they've all promised the moon. It really sucks. Like, he just started like spewing, like, I know exactly what this looks like, but here's how I can help you.
Almost like an accusation on it.
He's very, very good at that, but he also, like Laura, has some Southern charm mixed in. So he's got like a small accent. So he's
Is that
very
what you call
endearing
it?
with that.
Charm.
So I like that he made me aware of that.
Right. Yeah, because that's what he said when he went into, when he had to drop the pay and basically said, you're going to think that Chris Voss is a terrible negotiator. And you're going to think, like, but before I take this to somebody else, I wanted to give you an opportunity.
Yep.
So he plays off the loss aversion. And I don't know if the loss aversion was that this chapter or was that one of the next chapters.
Yeah, it was sprinkled in there.
Yes, it was, because it talked about people wanting to be more willing to take the smaller probability to avert a loss than to get a gain or whatever. Which, I mean, that's what we always get trained on in real estate, is the loss aversion thing. But I love that, to just anchor their expectations low, give them an accusation order right off the top, and then drop it like that. So when he talks about some of the things you can use to in negotiating, one of them, anchor their emotions, like we just talked about. Let your counterpart go first. One that I really, really love is establish a range. I love that. Instead of saying Mrs. Seller says, all right, what do you think we should list the house for? And I say, probably like, if I think it's going to be 350, we'll obviously go a little low, so we go up. So maybe like 340. Like, well, 340, I was thinking 350, blah, blah, blah. If I go, I would think a good spot to list is somewhere between 320 and 340. And all of a sudden that pulls the range lower. They still have that higher end, and it changes their perspective. Instead of just being whatever, I think the range hits different than a solid number. Because it does pull, it pulls the whole thing down. Then they're thinking, well, crap, I better get the 340, because you threw the 320 out there. And I don't do this enough. And that's the cool thing about this book, is like, hey, remember all these things that you write about and you don't do anymore? This is stuff that you need to do, idiot. So.
Right. Get on it, Steve.
But the range totally works. The range works. And the other one was the weird numbers. Use odd numbers. Don't offer 300,000. Offer from like 301, 733.
Right, something very specific.
22 cents.
Right. Because to me, not only does it look like you've actually done your due diligence and said, this is what I can afford, but also it stands out. And to see where everybody's offering 300, 300, 300, 301, 733 is like, what the hell did you just say? And all of a sudden you get on the top of the list,
They do that to us in shopping. Like, that's why prices of things are $2.99 because it's not quite $3. And so I'm constantly telling my kids, I'm like, okay, how much was the candy bar? And they're like, it was $3. And I'm like, was it $3 or was it $2.79? Like, I'm hyper aware of that. And like, stores will market clearance items as like $2.71 when they mark it down. That's how you know. So like,
the end number a lot of times in the store represents what stage
Costco
visit at
my wife like is a walking Costco. She's like, oh, it ends in 7 and they're getting ready to discontinue it. It ends in 6. I'm like, oh my Lord.
Listen, with 9,000 children all under the age of 3, you have to.
I think I do what I do.
David has no kids yet. So
I have no kids yet.
Yes.
I have Riley. I have the dog.
He's 5. His range from like 18 to 6 months. How old's your baby?
Baby's 8 months.
8 months. Okay.
17 to 8 months.
I can't believe it's gone that fast. It's crazy. But back to the range thing. So a lot of times, your sellers will ask you, hey, what do you think the house is worth? I don't ever put the number on the house. Ever. I will do what you do, Steve. I give them the range. Then I actually go through the comps with them. And my last question is, now that you've seen the comps, if this wasn't your home, what would you pay for it?
Right. That's a great.
You know the range. You know that any of these numbers are reasonable. But what would you pay for it?
Now, one other thing, and I'm sorry, I'm going back. I'm stealing it for a second. Talking about letting your counterpart go first. And it says most of the time. So a lot of times, all right, so where do we go? Let's just say, well, Steve, what do you think? A great line I learned from Kyle Whissel, and I use it all the time. Because I don't want to say a number and they think that it's crap or they think whatever. So what I'll say is, Mrs. Seller, everybody and their mother looks on Zillow, right? Everybody and their mother knows what this estimate is. This estimate of your house is $752,000. Where do you think that ranks? Or how does that play with what you think we should be? That way, I've given them a number and it's not mine.
Right.
It's blaming somebody else. It's given somebody else's whatever. That way, I didn't come up with it. Zillow did. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to use that as a range, though, a step past that, Zillow now has it posted everywhere that their prices are usually somewhere between 7 and 18% off. So if you're asking them a range, and that's a thing that you use to help guide your client, so you're not giving them. I just ask them the question: do you think their range is high or low?
And just there you go. I like it. All right, Devin, you're up.
Say it again.
You're up. What are your thoughts? Anything that would work for you and what you're doing?
So honestly, I may be stealing you and Laura's idea, at least for going, looking at investment properties, because I don't know. I get asked that all the time. What's this worth? How much would you pay for this? Yada yada yada. And it's just like, I hate giving a number. I'll give a range every now and then, but even that's kind of difficult sometimes. But yeah, no, definitely. You guys is I might steal some of you guys' tricks for that.
I like that. I mean, the range is so powerful, especially if you can pull it low. You know what I mean? And at least give them, at least at the top number is like in the realm of possibility. Because sometimes, you can go too low and just piss them off and you're out the door.
Right.
But if the bottom number can be, like if it's supposed to be 350, it's like, looking at the comps, the range can be somewhere between 300 and 340. What are your thoughts?
Right.
Right.
Or you could pull it all together, Steve. So my range is 515 to 525. You're at 550. After looking at this, would you pay 550? No.
Yeah.
All cohesive.
I feel like
One for no.
I feel like I used a little bit of it hearing him talk about the NFL negotiating against the players, where the players union said we want to see the books. In my role with Redfin, it's different, but I feel like every buyer thinks every home is overpriced and every seller thinks an offer is low. And so when I'm like, what are your thoughts? You're like, well, I think it's overpriced. I would try to say to them like, oh, well, we can ask to see the comps they pulled to get that number to try to reel them back to reality. Like there was an agent on the other side of that doing homework. And so like, I know as a buyer, you disagree, but when your agent pulls comps, y'all can ask to see where they got those numbers from, just to help them like come back down to earth, because I know that's always a pain point.
Yeah. I actually use that a ton of negotiating when an agent's like, why do you come in here? I'm like, well, maybe I missed something. Can you show me what I missed and show me why you got that range?
The I missed something is big, because then it's just like, and you have to be careful how you say it. It's like, it's just like saying, how am I supposed to do that? Like, there's a way to ask it to where you sound like a butthole.
Right.
Like, how am I supposed to do that? It's like, Mr. Kidnapper.
Where's your radio DJ voice?
Yeah, exactly. This is Steve talking to me now.
How am I supposed to do that?
How am I supposed? You got my aunt, and you asked for $50,000. It's just not. I don't have it right now. I have to sell my crap to get it. How am I supposed to do that?
Right.
And it's so powerful because, like he said, but the cool thing about this book, and we're just over a minute left. The cool thing about reading this book, again, this is probably my third time through it. This time I'm really focused on the fact that we are irrational creatures, all of us. We're all irrational. We're rational and we think that we are rational, which is scary. So if we go into it knowing how irrational we all are and using that irrationality to push people towards rationality, all these tricks are great, but if you know the reason why, anyway.
But what makes it easier, and I don't want to stop you, I just want to make sure we're set up for next week because we're about to get cut off. So next week, chapter 7, chapter 8, it's a little over an hour. Okay.
7 and 8 sounds good to me.
Perfect. Well, I'll see you guys here. I don't want to see you cut off.
Okay. You have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.